Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to Iron Anchor Cycles. I'm Shep, and we're back with our 2004 FXDX project here on the lift, and we're gonna tear into some new stuff today. So I think I mentioned in the last segment of this video that we were gonna probably start moving into the drive line and rear wheel and some of the stuff back here on the fender in the next segment, and that was gonna be after we did some of the engine stuff. Now, we did do a little bit of the engine work and we didn't record some of that, and really the reason for that is it's not totally on theme for the build series that we're doing here. If you haven't been following along, this is sort of the everyman Dyna, the budget build, the everything you need, nothing you don't, that sort of thing. And really what we've done with the engine has gone a little bit above and beyond just because we had the opportunity to, and so we decided we just would. So we did do that, and so I didn't record it because, like I said, it doesn't really fit. But what I will do is talk a little bit about what we did here and give you some sense of, kind of how this fits in. And also, we will include the dyno run for this bike and some of the break-ins so that, you get to see what the final result is. But anyway, what we've got here is, obviously we've got our pistons and cylinders back in, and we've got our cam chest partially installed. Don't have the lifters in yet, and then obviously the rest of the top end isn't on yet. Why we decided to stop here, I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but talk about what we did do. So this is essentially the top end is a kit essentially that comes from T-Man Performance. If you're not familiar with them, check them out. They do awesome top end stuff, way better than what you can buy off the shelf. So this is what they call their Street Performer kit. So this includes some headwork that's customized to our specs, and it includes a 98-inch kit in terms of relining your cylinders, and then pistons fit to match. So all of T-Man's stuff is done by hand. You get reports with numbers in terms of all the measurements, all the calculations, knowing that everything is just dead on perfect. So that's what we decided to do for the top end. We use them for top end stuff almost all the time. Their headwork is second to none as well. I'll show you the heads too. I'll go grab them and you can take a look. But for the cam chest, this is S&S stuff. We love S&S's cam chest components. We use fueling stuff too. S&S more often than not is the way we go for a number of reasons, but that's what we did here. So we are running S&S's 585 Easy Start cams, and that was a pretty specific choice because really wanted to put a big cam in this, knowing that we were going to do the valve springs and a little bit of headwork. Let's put a big cam in. S&S is unique in that they have this Easy Start option, which doesn't require compression releases in the heads. We did actually put compression releases in the heads. It wasn't really part of the plan, but just decided in the event that we wanted to do something else different with this down the road, having the compression releases there would be nice. But in the setup we're running now, we don't need them and we won't use them. So that Easy Start cam allows you to run higher compression, and we're set for just about 10.5 to 1 in terms of the way this was built. And that is really right in the sweet spot of getting the most out of these cams. So without compression releases, if you're running a 585 lift cam with that compression, the starter would have trouble starting the motor. With the Easy Starts, it's no problem because you get a little compression release there. So we've got those cams installed, and also, hopefully you can see here on the outside, we elected to go with gear drive. And this was really the reason that we kind of went a little crazy with this, was because when we checked our pinion shaft total indicated runout, we found that we were only at 0.02 of runout. And I think I might have shown that in a previous video, if you go back to the teardown. Having that really good balanced crank made us go, let's go a little further on this motor, given that we have the opportunity to. So we've got the gear drives in here. There's a lot of things when installing this. It's a little different than when you're doing, just a cam kit or you're doing chain drive. There's a lot of tolerances and clearances you need to check when you're doing something like this. So it's a fairly involved procedure to do all this stuff. And you're checking your gear lash on the inside, you're checking it here on the outside. A lot of that really needs to be dead on perfect. So for example, I don't know, maybe the microphone will pick this up. Hopefully you can hear that little clicking, and what that is the lash between the gears. So what that means is that you've got a little bit of play between these gears, and that's exactly what you want. So the spec, and you're gonna check it at multiple points around to make sure you don't have tight spots and loose spots. Basically at the thinnest or the smallest, you want 1/2 thousandth to 1,000th, and then at the other side, 2,000ths as the most. So that's obviously a very, very specific and very, very close tolerance that you need to have these at. There are undersized and oversized pinion gears that can help to correct that if it's not right. But obviously, you know, if you understand the pinion shaft run out and how that plays in, if your run out on the pinion shaft is too much, you're gonna have too wide a gap between those two numbers, you know, as the pinion shaft moves around, and you're never gonna get it within spec. So super, super important to do all that stuff when you're doing the gear drives. Like I said, we didn't film all this stuff just because it's pretty technical and pretty detailed, and we've done other cam chest installs and shown some of this stuff before, so decided to just kind of stay on theme for this build. One of the other things that's very important to do when you're doing a top end is once you've got your, actually before you have it final assembled, before you put your rings on your pistons, you're gonna do a sort of dry install, and you're gonna clamp down your cylinders over the pistons with the wrist pins in and all that, and you're gonna check your piston to deck height difference. And what you're looking for there is for the top of the flat part of the piston to be just a hair under your cylinder deck height. And when I say a hair, you're talking about maybe about 1,000th. It could be 2 to 3, somewhere, you know, you can get closer. All of this stuff is just a question of how you and who's ever building your engine and, you know, setting your stuff up, have it designed to be. So in our case, when we did this and we checked it, we were in the pocket, as they say, a little bit too far. We weren't getting quite enough closing that gap as much as we wanted to. So when we measured it on both sides of each piston, we were getting between 4 and 5 thousandths in terms of the distance between the top of the cylinder deck and the top of the piston. So we want to bring that up a little bit, and you kind of have two options there to correct that. Number one is you can machine the bottom of the cylinders to get them to drop down a little bit. The easier option is to get your compression back to where it should be, based on what that is supposed to be there. You can run a thinner head gasket. So originally we were running I don't know, I want to say a 36 thousandths head gasket, I think, or 34 thousandths. So we're going to run 30 thousandth head gaskets instead. And what that will do is bring the compression back into calculation of where we were trying to get to at that 10.5. If we set it up as is, our compression would be a little bit less than we planned, and that's not what we're going for. We want that 10.5 to 1 compression. So that is why we stopped here, because we don't have the head gaskets we need, so we've got them on order, but decided to just kind of clean everything up and move on to some other stuff as long as we've got the bike here and, you know, we've got some time to work on it today. So we're not going to be doing anything with the motor today. In fact, let me just go ahead and throw a little towel over here. We are going to be working on what I mentioned right in the very beginning, the driveline, rear wheel, brakes, some of that stuff. So we've got most of the stuff up front done. We've got our motor where it's got to be, and now we're going to start getting back here. So before we jump into that, I do want to show you the heads. So I'm going to go grab one of those and show you the work that T-Man did on it. It's really, really incredible, really, really nice work that they do. So I'm going to grab one of those, I'll show it to you, and then we will reposition over the other side and talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing over there. All right, so here is our head, and this one is the rear. Basically, the reason that the heads needed to get done was what you're looking at right here, which is valve springs. So, you know, depending on the cam you're running, and there's a lot of factors that go into it, a little bit more detailed than we can get into right now. But suffice it to say, you really need to make sure that your valve springs are correct and set up correctly based on your cam choice. So in the case of the early Dynas, in 2005, they made a change and they ran a stronger valve spring. But in the earlier models, the 2004 and earlier twin cams, you really can't run much of a cam in them with the stock valve springs. I think 510 might be the highest lift you can run, and really you're looking at running a Screaming Eagle cam at that point. There's really not much you can do. So we knew we wanted to get the springs done, so as long as we were going to do that, we decided to go ahead and send the heads to T-Man and have them go a little further. So what you can see obviously here is we've got new springs, new valve seats. They did a full valve job on it. and we've got new valves as well. And these look super, super good. I mean, I'm hoping that this all comes out on here. And then, obviously, we got the insides cleaned up in here as well. So it's obviously your exhaust side there, and then intake there. Really, really, really nice work that they do. Now, you know, depending on how far you want to go and what you're trying to do, they can open up these intake runners and set them up for a bigger throttle body with larger intake runners on your intake manifold. We didn't do that. We're going to be running a stock throttle body because we're not trying to go super crazy here. But having the heads cleaned up and everything checked and everything done, we had a couple of threads that were not great for the rocker stands, so we got those fixed. So these are ready to go. So as soon as we get our new head gaskets in the next day or so, we'll get back to getting the motor put together. But for now, I'm gonna get rid of this, reposition, and we'll get into today's project. All right, so basically what we're gonna be doing today is working over here on the left side of the bike. And the main project, I think that's probably the biggest piece of it, is getting the belt drive converted over to a chain. Now, I'm pretty sure I have showed how to do this before, but we're gonna do it again here, and we're gonna go step by step through all this stuff because, well, that's what this video series is about, doing a how-to and showing people how to do some of this. Now, the things we're gonna be doing at the same time is basically we haven't opened this primary up yet. I haven't seen what's inside. Obviously, all we've done is earlier on, we drained the fluid out of it, so we got our derby cover off, but I have not cracked this open yet. I don't know what we're gonna find in there in terms of what the clutch looks like, in terms of you know, the chain tensioner, the primary main shaft bearings. All that stuff is a mystery to me, and we're gonna hopefully find out you know, what's going on there. So in addition to that, we've got some things we gotta do kind of on this side. So obviously we're doing the chain kit here. We've got a sprocket to go on the rear wheel. While we have the rear wheel off, we are gonna jump into kind of everything we need to do there. So we've got a new rotor to go on, new pads for the caliper. We've got new shocks to go on. So we're gonna try in this segment of the video to kind of get all of this driveline stuff situated. And that's really gonna put us in a place where we are very close to finished with this bike and basically just ready to put the motor back together, get the tank on, and do some heat cycling, break it in, and then hopefully go rip it. But we've got some work to do today before we get to all that, so not trying to jump ahead of myself. So I'm gonna grab some tools and start to get some of this disassembly done, and we'll dive into it. In the meantime, if you haven't subscribed, make sure you do. Hopefully you're enjoying these videos. If you do, give us a like. Super helpful for us, for the shop, to keep doing this, to know people are into it. So just a little PSA for us there. But yeah, so stick around. I'll be right back, and we'll get to tearing this apart. All right, so ready to dig in. First thing we're gonna do is take this cover off. Obviously, if you haven't already, you're gonna wanna drain the fluid. We did that already, so we're gonna jump into taking the cover off. I think I mentioned these little organizers we use. These are from gyms. They're really great for keeping hardware organized when you've got different bolts that need to go in different places. They're a little expensive. I would say if you're just sort of doing this one-off kind of stuff, just keep your stuff organized. Don't waste the money on those. But if you're doing it regularly, it's a nice little help. So that's what we're using. So I'm just gonna go ahead and take these out. Now, yeah, just need a little persuasion, and this will come off. There you go. All right, so with that gasket broken free, this should slide off now. Okay. There we go. All right, so with the cover off, the first thing we're gonna do is start to take out the primary chain assembly with the compensator and the clutch. So first step there is gonna be to grab a hold of the snap ring on the clutch adjuster and remove that. Oop. There we go. And then the adjuster will come out. Put that aside. So now we've got access to the nut back here, and then we've got the bolt for the compensator. So we're going to take that stuff out, but before I do that, I'm going to take the tension off of the primary chain by loosening this nut here. 16th socket. Go ahead and loosen that up. And the tensioner will drop. And this doesn't need to be removed all the way. It can kind of hang out there. Now we need to do is take these, the bolt here and the nut here off. I guess this is kind of a nut too. Okay, so there's one. And so the way this comes apart, depending on sort of how you pull it, you can grab sort of half the compensator with the nut here and kind of take that off and put it aside. And then on the clutch side, we're going to flip the gun around the other way. So this is a reverse threaded nut. And then you just want to check and see what you've got in terms of spacers and things. You've got the shaft extension here. We're going to take that off as well. And just sort of keep the compensator, all those pieces and springs and all that stuff, keep it in the same order you took it out in so you know how to put it back together. All right, so flathead screwdriver. Just going to pry this little tab away. Flatten that down. So I'm going to hold the jack shaft with this rag and boom. No problem. So then we'll pull that bolt out along with the gear and the spring, and the rest of that I'm going to leave in place. I mean, you can pull this part out too, actually. You know, let's just take it all out. Take the whole jack shaft assembly out. So that's the whole thing. So now what you're left with is there's a sort of a collar that connects this to the starter. That'll stay on the starter. And then there's a seal back here. But in any event, we'll get to that stuff when we go to sort of refurb everything. But I'm going to put this piece aside. And we're getting there. So the next thing is I'm just going to undo this shifter linkage here, which I think we already loosened up. All right. Okay. And now I'm going to run to the other side, undo the two bolts on the starter. Now I'm not going to move the camera and set that up and show it to you, but basically some bikes you're going to have to remove the battery box in order to get to these, some you don't. In our case, the battery box is already off because we took it off to do the handlebar wiring. So it's sort of one of those things, don't start putting stuff back together until you know you're going to not need it apart again. So I'm just going to undo those, and then what we're going to do is once the starter is free of the primary, it's pretty much ready to take off. We're just going to come in here and fold these lock tabs back and then take off the two outer bolts and the inside bolts, and we should be able to slide the inner primary off of the transmission and the motor. So I'm going to run to the other side, do that, and then we'll come back to do this. So, bolts all removed and starter disconnected, our inner primary I should say, should be free. So, just give it a little slide and catch that oil. And inner primary slides right off. Okay, so with the area cleaned up a little bit, got all of our stuff out of the way, next thing we're gonna do is take a look at getting the belt drive sprocket off. Now, You could have taken your rear wheel off first here. We're gonna do it second. Shouldn't really matter one way or the other. So the first thing we're gonna do is take the lock plate off. So that's held in by two these cap head screws. And this would be easier if the wheel was on the ground. There we go. Okay. Those out of the way, lock plate slides off. So now we've got our nut here. So you got a couple of options. You can make a socket to go on here. You can buy one. We got ours from Fast Eddie, Milwaukee, small company, Chris Graves. Hit them up if you're looking for any of this stuff. You can get them from gyms also, but I just like the Fast Eddie tools. So you've got the big socket, and then you've got a small collar here that's going to protect the main shaft and also keep the tool lined up. So one thing to note, some of these are left-handed thread and some of them are right-handed thread depending on your particular model. Service manual might tell you sometimes it's stamped on the transmission sprocket itself. These earlier ones tend to be left-handed thread. That's what we've got on ours. So I'm gonna grab the impact gun and we'll just start to bust that loose. All right, so obviously we broke that free. You know, really not a big deal. Obviously had to work on it for a minute there, but these are no joke. If you don't have a really good impact gun, you're not gonna get this off. You can mess around with breaker bars and all kinds of stuff, and you're gonna wind up turning the wheel and all kinds of nonsense. You just need a lot of oomph to get these off. So that's my little PSA on that. So put that stuff aside. And now, this is more or less ready to come off. But what we're gonna do before I try and pull this off is I'm just gonna go ahead and take the rear wheel off, and we'll be able to get the belt and everything off kind of all at once. Okay, so now with the tension off the belt, and you don't need to take your rear wheel off to get this tension off, but we're taking it off anyway. So again, just doing things as easy as we can. So the belt's obviously free, so this sprocket is just gonna slide off. Okay, so we'll put this in our box of takeoff stuff because obviously that's not going back on. And we will get to cleaning this up and taking a look at what we're gonna do here in preparation to put the chain sprocket on. But before we do that, I'm gonna do a little bit more over here just to get some of this stuff out of the way. Now, we are gonna keep the passenger pegs, kind of no reason for us to take them off at the moment. I'm gonna be getting rid of this upper belt guard and lower belt guard in order to make room for the chain. And in doing that, it'll also enable us to get this belt off. The only other thing that's gonna have to get undone is one of your shock mounts, then you can just pull the belt off. So let me grab the wrenches to do that, and we'll get these guards off and get this shock disconnected, and then we'll be ready to keep moving along. All right, and I'm just gonna loosely put this back on because obviously we're taking these shocks off, so I'm not gonna go all the way. Okay, so before we start putting the new sprocket on, this is an opportunity that you wanna kind of take a look at what's going on behind your primary and address anything if you need to. Now, in our case, things look really, really good. There is no signs of anything leaking. All these seals here, 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 everything seems to be good. Seal on the inside of the back of the primary case seemed like it was fine too. No evidence of any leaks anywhere, which is great. We did a little bit of cleaning up of the old O-ring material around the engine case. Transmission side, we really haven't done much. Did a little bit of wiping off of these threads just to get the old Loctite off of them. But otherwise, this is pretty much as we found it. So, you know, we'll do a little wipe here just to get rid of some of this grime, but not much that's needed to be done there. So we're gonna leave all the seals in place. If you do get to this point on your bike and you see that you've got leaks or anything like that, take the opportunity to fix that stuff now, because coming back here to do this again isn't something you probably want to do. One thing, however, that we are going to do because we're here is we are going to change the race for the main shaft bearing. Now, for these early bikes, this would be Big Twins through 06 or through 05 for the Dynas. There is an upgraded main shaft bearing. So this is the Jim's part. I'm going to show it to you right there. Basically what you've got, and I'll open this up, is it's a new seal, new snap ring, but basically it's a one-piece bearing, like sort of looks like a wheel bearing, that will replace this race and roller bearing that's inside of the primary case. So we'll press this into the primary case, and it's a slip fit onto the main shaft here. So these are a nice upgrade. It's a really good, really solid part. These are prone to walking and leaking and all kinds of stuff. So, you know, I think these are 40 or 50 bucks for this little retrofit kit here. Definitely a worthwhile little upgrade to do while you're here doing this. So what we're gonna do now is just go ahead and get this ready to get taken off. So we've got our puller. So this slides on behind the race. And just check to make sure we're going on evenly there. And we slide that onto there. Now, there's some things to look out for here. You gotta be careful with this tool. The instructions call for no more than 50 pounds of force to be used on this puller. If you're getting to a point where you need to put more than 50 pounds on it, you're gonna wanna heat this race up to loosen it up a little bit. But you also have a temperature limitation there. They don't want you to heat it more than 200 degrees, because at that point you can start melting seals. So you just have to be careful with doing this. So I'm gonna grab a couple of wrenches and we'll start to work this race off, and hopefully it comes off nice and easy. Okay, so we're gonna get ready to go here now. We're gonna use a torque wrench to do this so that we can keep track of the torque we're putting into it, making sure that we're not gonna exceed that 50 pounds. So I'm just gonna go ahead and set this, which I didn't do before I put it on here. 50, okay. And let's see what we can do here. Oh, well, looks like we went up to 50.7 there, but it seemed to that actually broke it free. So the race is moving now. It looks like we're about 40 pounds force pulling it now. There we go. Okay. All right, so there's our race pulled off, and hope you can see there. So it's got a little bit of wear on it, not terrible, and it hadn't walked either. So that's pretty good. But like I said, when you're here and you've got all the access to all this stuff, a little bit of cheap insurance isn't a bad thing. So just get the pinion shaft cleaned off, and we will get moving along here. All right, so I figured I'd take a little quick break right now to take a look at some of the parts that we're about to put on so I can show you what those look like. So what we're doing for the chain kit on this one is a pre-packaged kit, which is a pretty easy way to do it. Some of the other bikes we do, we'll sort of buy a sprocket, spacer, and kind of put it together ourselves. But on this one, wanted to do something that was sort of easy for the average person to be able to sort of get a hold of. So we're using a kit from Tracker Die. These are available, you can get them from Tracker Die. We have them on our website too. And it comes with everything you need for the chain conversion. So first thing is one of their sprockets. And these are really cool, I think. Part of the reason I like this kit so much. I just think that's a great looking sprocket. I like the design. It's aluminum, lightweight, strong, awesome. So we opted to go with a 55 tooth rear sprocket. And this was really planned more around not planning to go as crazy as we were going on the motor and wanting to get a little bit more low end torque out of the bike. The motor we're building now, we probably could have gone with a closer to stock setup and balanced that power band a little bit more. But to be honest, for a stunt bike and wanting that low end torque, the bigger sprocket's gonna be no problem either way. So we've got that. Not part of the kit, but next in the box is a new rear rotor. And this is not necessary, and I think I mentioned in an earlier video when we did the front brakes, we did need to do the front rotors in order to accommodate the calipers we were running. However, the rear, really we just decided to put a new rear rotor on because we want it to match the front. This was mostly an aesthetic decision. So this rear rotor, stock size, stock specifications, bolt right up. Obviously I don't have them here in the box, but we're gonna change the brake pads and the rear caliper as well and make sure that's all cleaned up and ready to go. So got our rotor. Now back to the chain kit. Obviously you can't have a chain kit without a chain. So this is a Bike Master chain. This is an O-ring or an X-ring chain. It's one of them, it's sealed X-ring, XR X-ring. And this is a black chain with chrome hardware. So we got that. We've got grade 8 bolts and washers for that sprocket. We have the rear sprocket spacer, and this is one of the things I actually really dig from Track or Die. Is first of all, I like that they've got a little bit of writing on here, just gives it something cool. So it's got their name on it, says faster than heck, kind of cool thing. But what's cool about this spacer is that it has these index pins in it, which are gonna line up and index to the sprocket, if I have it on the right way. All right? Only goes one way. There we go. Okay? So that's gonna kind of go through there, and it's gonna keep everything oriented without any slipping, which I think is a really great feature for this kit. If you wanna use this spacer with somebody else's sprocket, you can do that. You just have to take these pins out, so no big deal. Last thing is gonna be a sprocket from PBI. This is included in the kit as well. Same sprocket we normally run. And this sprocket is gonna have the correct number of teeth and the correct offset, and everything is gonna line up and work as it should. One of the things that can be a little bit difficult to figure out when you're doing a chain kit by yourself as opposed to buying one of the kits is figuring out what offsets you need in the front and the rear to get everything to line up and to get everything to clear as it should. Buying the pre-packaged kits makes that easy because all the kind of guesswork's been done for you. So there is a little spec sheet included with all PBI sprockets to kind of show the different ones they make, the different offsets, tooth counts, all that stuff, but not necessary to deal with that when you're doing it with a kit. So this is the part we were coming to the kit for. We're ready to go ahead and put this sprocket on. So we'll head back over to the other side of the bike and we'll get this going. Okay, so with this all cleaned up, go ahead and we're gonna take our new sprocket, and this obviously is directional. You don't wanna make sure you put this on going the right way. The offset side is gonna go in towards the bike. Just line that up on the teeth there. And there you go. I'm gonna slide that on. Now we're gonna take the nut and we're gonna put some red Loctite in there. Okay, sort of work that around. And we also do want to put a little bit of lubricant on here. You can just use engine oil to do it, but I've got a little bit of primary oil just sitting in that pan. So we're just gonna put some of this on the faces just to loosen that friction a little bit. All right, so put that there. There. Okay. So now we're going to put this nut over, Start that by hand. Now, as I'm doing this, one thing I'd like to point out here is we've got a new tool to use today. And that is the sprocket locking tool from 9-finger. So what these guys have cleverly done is created a locking tool to use with a chain sprocket. Now, you know, kind of everybody's got the sprocket locking tool for the belts, but there, up until this point, hasn't really been a good tool to hold this sprocket so you can torque this nut. And typically what we've done in the past is just you put the impact gun on there, you make it real tight, and you get your lock plate to line up and you're good to go. But this tool from 9-finger is a really actually neat sort of new tool. So you wrap this chain around here and it will push up against your swing arm. I'm just gonna take a little bit of something here, just put a rag in there just to keep from scratching the swing arm. But now you've got something to turn against, so you can actually use the torque wrench on this, which is pretty cool, I think. So the spec for this bike is an initial torque of 60 foot-pounds and then an additional 30 to 45 degrees, depending on how the holes line up, of additional torque. So we're gonna set this guy to 60. I'm gonna put this on. A little harder to do one-handed. There we go. And we'll torque that to, I guess we got 63 there. That's all right. And now, I'm gonna slide that off. Now what I'm gonna do is, I mean, we can use the angle guide on the torque wrench, which maybe we'll do too, but I'm also just gonna make a couple of marks on the sprocket and the nut so that we have a reference point of where we started. So put this guy back on, and I'm gonna put my little rag back in here. All right, well, really not able to get any more turn out of this. I'm gonna just put a bigger wrench on here. Can't use the torque wrench because we're maxing it out, because it's just a 3/8 drive torque wrench. So let me get a bigger wrench here and go ahead and give that a little bit more turn. All right. Well, I don't think that's quite 30 degrees, but that is very, very tight. So I don't think I'm gonna go much further than that. I'm gonna take a look and see if our lock plate lines up here. And looks like it will line up there. If I can give it just a little bit more, it'll line up a little bit better. So I'm gonna try. I'll just readjust this a little bit. There we go. All right, that is gonna be fine. Okay, so let's take a look. Lock plate, perfect. So this lock tool works super, super well, so that's awesome. Check out 9-finger Fabrication if you're looking for one of these. These are not expensive either. I think they're like 40 or 50 bucks. All right, so with our lock plate ready to go, put a little bit of blue Loctite on the set screws for it, and throw those back in. Okay. There's one. And two. All right, pull that out. And obviously we can remove our guide for the socket. Cool, we're ready to go. Got our sprocket on, and we're ready to keep rolling. So from here, what you can do is just go ahead and start to put the primary back together, because obviously the chain will be open and you'll be able to just sort of pass it through rather than the belt that had to go around. What I like to do though is get the rear wheel on and get the chain set up while this is still exposed. It just makes it a little easier to run it. So then you can come back once the chain is on and just put the primary on. You can, like I said, do it either way. I just find it a little easier to run the chain through with the primary not on. So that's what I'm gonna do. We'll get cleaned up a little bit here, and then I will we'll jump over to working on that rear wheel, and we'll get that set up and ready to go back on the bike. So we're gonna go ahead and just change out these brake pads real quick before we put the rear wheel back on. Just kind of clean this up a little bit, spread the pads open. And I'm just gonna take the pins out. All right, so we've got our old pads. Get rid of those. Got new pads to go in. Before we do that, let's do just a little bit more wipe down with the brake cleaner in here. Would be ready to go. We actually have one more part that I forgot about that needs to go on right now. So let me grab that, we'll talk about it, and we'll put it on. All right, so sorry for the brief interruption, but I forgot about this part and I wanna put it on. So what we're gonna be doing is a little upgrade on the axle adjusters on the rear here. Now, on these, call them mid-year Dynas, that would be early twin chems, I guess. You kind of got half a good system, half a bad system here. So there's a little bit of an opportunity for an upgrade in a pretty easy way. So these are axle adjuster blocks. This is the plate that pushes against the outside of the swing arm and the bolt that moves it back and forth. Now, these blocks are a big upgrade from the round kind of eyelets that used to be in there on the earlier bikes, but you still just have kind of a stamped piece of, you know, kind of just nothing steel here at the end that can kind of bend and twist and maybe not stay exactly where you put it. So enter bare knuckle, and they've got a little upgrade for this. So I'm gonna show you these parts. So here's that upgrade, which is basically just a replacement for the end piece here. So instead of this little kind of doodad there, you have a nice, big, thick, machined piece of aluminum. A lot stronger, a lot stiffer. And then, instead of a bolt, we've got a stud with an Allen key end and a lock nut to lock this down in place. So two nice benefits to upgrade there. So grab the other one. I've already installed this side here, so you can see kind of the difference. So that'll slide on the end to move this back and forth, and you've got your adjusting stud and lock nut to lock it down. So pretty cool, nice little upgrade. I'm gonna throw these in now, and we'll keep going on this wheel. There's our wheel, and we're ready to keep moving along. So obviously I have to torque down this axle, and we're gonna have to get this wheel squared up and all that, but we'll take care of that, squaring up on the adjusters. We move over to do the chain, which will probably be the next thing we've got coming up. All right, so with the wheel back in place and you know, not totally centered here or squared up, we just did it by eye, but sort of in the middle of the adjustable range for the axle, we're gonna go ahead and kind of do a test fit on the chain. Now, obviously, if you've done one of these before, you know they come long, you have to cut it down, and then you have to put your final link together. So on the chains you should be using, which is an O-ring or an X-ring chain, it's not just a little master link with a clip, it's a real riveted link. So it's a little bit more involved to do it, but you get a much stronger, much better chain at the end. So I'm gonna start off here by just kind of feeding this through, and I'm gonna go this way, I think. All right. So, I'm sorry if I'm blocking the view. Hopefully you can tell that you would be able to do this with the primary on. It's just a little easier to get at it with it off. All right. So, let's see. That looks like a pretty good spot. Okay, so hopefully it's a little bit better view. So you got the chain coming up around the bottom, and then you got the long end here on the top. Now, your new link, and I'll grab that here. So hopefully it'll focus there. Yeah, so what you've got is, it's the black outer part, right? So basically what you're doing is you're replacing one of these black outer links to connect the two chrome inner links. So what that means is that you have to break it in a spot where you'd be taking off a black outer link versus a chrome inner link. So let me see if that makes sense, right? So this pin right here is a good breaking spot, right? So if you took this pin out, you'd be left with the silver link behind it, the silver link here, and your new black link would go right through there. If you were one tooth over, just for the sake of argument, if you were right here, okay? Let's just say that that's where it ended. This wouldn't work, okay? So the reason is because if you break this pin out, what's gonna be left behind is this black link here, and you're gonna be taking the silver link off, and that link won't connect those two. So you just need to be careful of that. So in a situation like this, where it did wind up, and actually we could have gone maybe one further, well, maybe not. Yeah, so that's where we were, right there. So this is a good spot to be in. Now, you sort of look at the slack and go, you know, maybe I could move one more tooth, but as you just saw, moving one tooth isn't enough. You have to move two to get back on that correct link. So this is gonna be where we're gonna break this right here, and we're gonna wind up just adjusting the axle a little bit further back in order to pick up the slack in the chain. So that's gonna be the plan. Now, I did not grab a marker. Actually, there's one right here. So what we're gonna do here is mark this pin, knowing that that is the pin that we are going to be driving out to set up our chain. So from here, we're gonna take this chain off, we're gonna go over to the workbench, and we're gonna get started on taking that apart. Okay, so the first step in getting this chain ready is to break this rivet to get this excess length off of here. So what we've got here is, let me show you the box. Okay, this is the chain breaker and riveter tool we use. This is from Motion Pro. We sell these too, link below if you want to grab one of these. It works nice because it'll do a bunch of different kinds of chains, but it also does both functions, the breaking and the riveting, which is cool. So it comes with pretty detailed instructions, so I'm not going to get into the assembly of the tool and all the different tips and sort of anvils and things it has, but basically suffice it to say it comes in a box like this. It's got a couple different attachments to it. We've got the tool here set up to do braking. So you've got a breaker tool loaded into the guide here. So what we're going to do is put this tool onto the chain around that rivet that we colored in. And sorry, trying to do this so the camera can see it. A little easier to do it otherwise. Okay, so I'm going to snug that down. Let me grab a wrench here. Okay, this doesn't need to be super tight, so we're just going to kind of give it a little snug there. And then it's this upper one here, which is going to do the braking. Now, it can be, particularly when you're doing the riveting, which we haven't gotten to yet, this can be fairly tight. It comes with a little tool to turn it with. I find it's easier to do with a wrench. All right, so I'm going to hold this side of the body with a wrench. It does come with a little pin for this side too, but I don't know. I just like the wrenches. So we're going to turn this, and basically what's going to happen is you're going to get sort of the initial tension, which is going to be kind of shearing the pin. But once you break through the weld, so to speak, or the rivet, it should start to get easier. There we go. So now it's turning freer. And we're going to drive this pin. Kind of fell apart there. We're going to drive this all the way through. So we can see the rivet kind of coming out the bottom. Just going to put this little guy on. It's probably enough to hold it now. And just going to keep turning until the pin falls out the bottom of the tool. All right, my apologies there. With the battery in the camera just died and I didn't notice, so I'm not sure how much of this we missed, or hopefully maybe none of it, not sure. But anyway, we drove this all the way through with the wrench. The pin popped out the bottom of the tool right here. And now we're just gonna go and do the reverse and pull that back out. So we'll start with the top. Take that all the way out. And then we'll go to the second one, which is the one holding the chain in place. Pull that out. And then our spring and, oh, sorry, I was out of the shot there. Spring and breaker come out of the top there. But more importantly, chain comes apart now. So there should be an O-ring on either side, or an X-ring in the case of this chain. Yep, so there's 1 and 2. And now we have taken this black link off. So hopefully what I was talking about before will make sense to you. So the other end of the chain is call it a male end, the silver end, which looks like this. We'll just use it as an example. You need 2 silver ends like this to go together to put that new black link around the 2 of them. If you had it like this and you were trying to connect an end like this to an end like that, they're not going to go together with a link in between. They have to go directly together. So it's got to be like this so you can put that link in. All right. So with the chain back on the bike, you can see we've got our 2 sort of female ends here, and we've got our new male master link to go on. So we've got 2 operations that have to be done here. The first is pressing the side plate onto the master link, obviously around the chain. That's a press fit. And once you do that, then the noses here need to be flared over to create the rivet. So the first thing we need to do is put the first 2 X-rings, or I guess all the X-rings on here. So we're going to take some of the grease and we're going to put that liberally onto all 4 of these X-rings. So X-rings are in place on the back side. I'm going to grease up the front two here. Okay, the X string's in place. We take this outside plate, hold it in place. We take the chain tool set up for plate pressing operation. So this is not the easiest thing in the world to line up, but we're gonna do our best. So I'm gonna slowly start to tighten this down, and what we need to do is just make sure that we don't lose the alignment. And there are holes on the back side of this plate for the pins to pass through, and you kind of can use them as a sight to make sure you're still lined up. And then we're going to check it. I'm going to back the tool off. Now, the pins have started to push through, so that's good. So it's being held in place. So getting it aligned again will be easier. But what we need to do is set the width of these plates so that they are the same, or very close to the neighboring plates. When I say very close to, a little bit further out, so that if they move in a little bit during the riveting process, you won't be too tight. So if we measure an adjacent set of pins here, let's see, we got actually 22 millimeters exactly on the caliper, or 22.01 now. So we're still out of spec here. Let's see where we're at. Well, that's not right. We are at 22.6 here, so a little bit further in to go. So I'm going to put the tool back on, and it's much easier to align it once the pins are sticking through, and you don't have to hold the plate in place. That helps a lot. Right, so we're going to go one. Okay. That was maybe a little less than a full turn there. Let's see what kind of progress we made. And obviously you want to go a little bit at a time, because you can always go tighter, but there's nothing you can do to spread these back out. All right, so let's see where we're at. Okay. All right, so we are just about perfect right there. So just want to check this out, make sure that it's not binding up at all. It looks like we are good. Okay, got motion on both of them. That would be the idea. Okay, so setup here for the last operation is to flare these over. So once again, the tool goes over. We're going to do these one at a time now. I'll do this first one first here. Okay. So we're going to snug that. And now we're using the driver, the internal driver, to flare that out. Now, basically, the spec for this chain is 10 to 20 thousandths of flare. Which is really, really not a lot. Obviously, 10 thousandths to 20 thousandths is pretty small. That's all we want to flare this, is that much. We're not trying to, mash it, even or anything like that. So I'm going to start by just giving a half a turn and seeing where that puts us. Okay. Just the handle there. Just move just a hair. Keep going. So, hope you can see this isn't, I wouldn't say per se a difficult process. It's just a slow one. It's a little tedious. Okay. Perfect. So that one is exactly right in the middle of the range we're looking for, and it is done. So now we are going to attempt to get this guy exactly the same. Perfect. Okay, so I actually got a little carried away with the camera off. I was cleaning up the inner primary and kind of forgot that I was videotaping this, and just went ahead and put this primary cover back on here. So I'll just tell you what I did because, well, we missed a few things. We've got our new one-piece bearing installed in the primary case. This is not a complicated procedure, but you do need the correct tools to press and pull these bearings out. So that's something you want to do. You'll need a little bit more info, and some tools to do it. New seal back there, new seal up here, and a new O-ring between the case and the crankcase here. So that's basically what we've got. I haven't put any of the hardware or anything on. It just kind of slid it into place. So we're ready to keep moving along. So let's go ahead, get this guy lined up here. That looks like the right way. All right, so, all right, with that squared away, we can move on to reinstalling the starter. So I'm gonna walk around to the other side, push that in, and then we'll look at doing the jack shaft. Okay, so with the starter bolted back up on the other side, take the jack shaft assembly we took out and slide that back in. Just being careful going through the seal, and start to tighten this down. All right, so at this point, you need to hold this, the rag more or less, to be able to tighten this nut down. It is a little difficult. And certainly, I mean, there is a torque spec for it. I've never really been able to get a good torque reading on this. So I just do it as best as I can and put that lock ring in place, and we've always been fine. All right, so we got that there. And we will push the lock tab over. And good to go. Okay. All right, so we've got our clutch and compensator assembly with the chain all ready to just slide on here. You're gonna do this as an assembly and get the splines on each shaft lined up. Okay. And there we go. So once that's in, should rotate freely, no issues. Just looking for a rag for my hands. Okay. And now from here, we've got the compensator and the bolt to install, and then the clutch hub nut to install here. So we're gonna do the compensator side first. So we're gonna take some red Loctite, which I left over on the other bench. And we're gonna put it onto the threads here. And by the way, I'm not dousing this, I'm just sort of swishing it around. It's really just a couple of drops is all you need. Just like it always is with Loctite. Okay. So we're gonna slide that through the outside portion of the compensator, which we took off. And again, just keep all this together. You can clean it up, just make sure you have some oil on it when you put it back together. And you put it back together in the same way. And we're gonna slide this on and get that to engage and tighten this down. Okay, so with that one on, we'll move over to the clutch side. We're gonna use red Loctite on this one as well. Just a couple of drops is really all you need. And I'm gonna come through here and attach this, remembering that there's left-hand threads on this one. Grab the sockets for these. And we're gonna put this one on hand tight. Okay. Now we'll start the process of torquing these down, and we'll go from there. All right, so we're doing 165 foot-pounds over here, the nice big 1/2-inch torque wrench. We're gonna install the locking shoe, if you wanna call it that, up there. And now, before you get anywhere tightened, just make sure that chain is not caught on anything, on the case, anything like that. You just want to make sure it's not going to dig in anywhere. This isn't like the late Dynas where you have to use that crossbar instead of the little wedge, but you still just want to double check and make sure. All right. So that tightened to 165. We're gonna move the locking tool to the other side. So the clutches, we're gonna do 75 pounds on this one. And it's left-handed thread, which means you need a torque wrench that works in reverse. So make sure you know if your torque wrench works in reverse, because if it doesn't, I mean, they all are gonna have the little, click forward, reverse, or on, off, or whatever it is. But not all torque wrenches will actually function in the reverse direction. And if yours doesn't, you might wind up over tightening stuff. So just be cognizant of that. All right, just put that on. And again, just double checking that the chain isn't caught on anything. It's not going to interfere with the case at all. And all right. So now, take the locking tool out. You don't want to forget that. You leave that thing in there and start your motor. My guess is it's going to be a bad day for you. So our next step is going to be to put the clutch adjuster back in place. So that goes there. Get that guy seated back in place. Just make sure, be 100% sure it is fully seated in its groove. Back this off. So we'll be ready to go to adjust that. I'm not going to do that adjustment quite yet. I'm going to get everything else kind of buttoned up here, and then we'll go ahead and take care of that. If you haven't done one of these manual ones before, basically what you're going to do is you kind of pick a spot for the adjuster that's kind of a guess, and you're going to put it in that spot and check it and see if you were right. And if you were right, you leave it alone, and if you weren't, you make an adjustment up or down to correct. All right, that may be the one right there. All right, so what we want to do is turn the motor over and kind of check in a couple of spots and just see what where the tension is different and measure in a couple of places. So to turn the motor over, the easiest thing that's right in front of me is probably this socket. All right, I'm gonna go this way. Now, if your motor was together, you wouldn't be able to turn it over like this because obviously you'd have compression going on up top. But since ours is apart, this is pretty easy to move this way. All right. So what I'm looking for is, there's some variation. There is a range, but I'm looking for about a 1/2 inch of up and down play, which is what we've got right here. Check right here. Good. And I'm going to do one more. Cool. All right. So with the primary chain adjusted, the last thing is the clutch. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So what we're going to do is collapse the clutch cable to get some slack. All right, so we want that free play at the lever. Now we'll do our clutch adjustment. All right. And so what I'm trying to feel for here is kind of, if you're a engine guy, this would be like 0 lash on the push rods. You're trying to find just that spot where it just kind of makes that solid contact with the push rod that's behind it. So I'm going to call that right there. I'm going to give it a 1/2 turn. And tighten it down. All right. And this isn't totally necessary to use the lock block here. Like, this can obviously be done with the cover on, but because the cover's off, just makes it easy to be able to tighten that. All right. So with that done, get that tool out of there again. Where's my socket? Okay. And we are basically ready to put the cover back on. Okay, so we got a lot done today, and I'm actually going to stop it right there. I know we didn't totally get it done with the primary cover back on, but I'm going to leave it alone for a couple of reasons, not the least of which is I don't have the primary cover gasket. We had a gasket kit for this one, but had to use it on a different bike for a customer, so had to order a replacement. We'll have it in a couple of days. But honestly, this video's just gotten, I'm sure, very long. Obviously, we have to go edit it and hopefully get it down to a reasonable length, but we covered a lot of stuff. Most importantly, I think, doing the chain drive. Obviously, we did some work back here with the rear brake and did all that primary stuff. So hopefully that's going to be helpful. I think what we're going to do is we're going to keep working on this bike. We're just going to cut the video here, and we're going to start a new segment that we'll publish a little bit later on once we get everything ready. So In the next segment, what we're gonna get done is take care of the shocks in the back, deal with some of this lighting and license plate stuff, and just kind of get this stuff all buttoned up and get it ready to roll. And we got some cool stuff to go on there. And we'll get the primary buttoned up, and hopefully we'll get the rest of the motor back together too. That's gonna be a big one. So lots more to come, stick around. We'll be back with the next one. Hopefully you're enjoying. Make sure to subscribe so you can keep following along. See you next time.